Theodore Roethke. He was born in 1908. Unfortunately, he passed away in the 60s from a heart attack. The main thing that I loved about Roethke is that he suffered from bipolar disorder, which greatly influenced his writing, which it usually does to artists. The sad story of Roethke is, as you can see, is over here. His father died of cancer, and his uncle committed suicide. And that happened when Roethke was very young. Luckily, he grew up surrounded by nature, because his father was an immigrant from Germany, I think, which also was probably hard for him later on because of World War II and the Nazis and everything. So I bet he had a lot of stuff going on subconsciously, fighting that part of himself. Roethke was an emotional man, given, bipolar disorder, but he was the first of his family to attend university, and he ended up being a professor. He taught through numerous colleges. I didn't list them here, but he was really eccentric, apparently, but he was always the favorite. Kind of think of that Robin Williams movie, The Dead Poets Society. I kind of picture him in my head as that. He loved the greats, Emerson, Thoreau. He was actually paired alongside with the transcendental type poets a lot. When people talk about him, he just pushed himself into a more subconscious psychological level. He did win the Pulitzer Prize for his poetry collection, The Waking. I love this quote about him. I don't see anyone else that has the kind of deep gut vitality that Roethke's got. Whitman was a great poet, but he's no competition for Roethke. Irony is I did my final project in literary theory on a poem by Whitman. Ha-ha! No, oops. So why does he matter? Mainly, actually there's many reasons, but the biggest part was that he was driven by trying to figure out what was going on in his mind, his unconscious mind, which I can totally relate to because I've always been fascinated by psychology, which was mostly fueled because growing up I suffered intensely through bipolar disorder and anxiety and a plethora of other things, but I felt a lot of kinship with that. And I do that same sort of thing in my art and my poetry, so maybe I've been influenced by Roethke without even knowing it, because he influenced poets and artists, specifically Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, and Robert Bly. He does do a kind of stream of conscious technique. I think I do have a poem in here that shows a pretty great example of that. And like I said here, he's a transcendental, but he pushed himself a little more. So he's not just talking about outside things. He's not just talking about the world. A lot of his poems are more geared toward his inner turmoil, or the mysteries of one's inner self. I thought I'd list the books that he, or volumes, sorry, that he did right here. Open House, I list a couple here. The Lost Sun and Other Poems, I didn't put a poem from here. From Praise to the End, From the Waking, this is the collection that got him the Pulitzer Prize. From Words of the Wind, From I Am, Says the Land. Those are actually a lot of children's books. Party at the Zoo isn't in the version of the Kindle collection that I bought, but they're actually eerily similar to Dr. Seuss, so maybe that's just a kid poem thing. I don't have kids, and I don't really know any kids, so I don't read kid poems. The Far Field, I have a couple poems from in here, or on the presentation. I just thought it was interesting to list all the collections, because he discovered poetry later in his life, because he was born in the, oh my gosh, what was it, 1908? So it wasn't until he was much older that he realized that he was a writer. He was even a teacher before this. And then he was like, I guess I should do it. Okay, styles. He does rhyme. A lot of it is in sets of 2 or 4. A lot of the stuff is very raw, full of rage. Very, like that quote says, it's very guttural. He does have some nature themes. I'm not really keen to nature poems. I get kind of bored. I do like the rhyming, and I like the subconscious mysticism pushing towards the understanding depression type of stuff. Okay, here's the first poem. From The Far Field, 1964. I believe this is one of the last volumes he put together. In a dark time, the eye begins to see. I meet my shadow in the deepening shade. I hear my echo in the echoing wood. A lord of nature weeping to a tree. I live between the heron and the wren, beasts of the hill and the serpents of the den. What's madness but nobility of soul, at odds with circumstance, the day's on fire. I know the purity of pure despair, my shadow pinned against a sweating wall. That place among the rocks, it is a cave. Or winding path, the edge is what I have. A steady form of correspondences, a night flowing with birds, a ragged moon, and in broad day the midnight come again. A man goes far to find out what he is. Death of the self in a long, tearless night, all natural shapes blazing unnatural light. Dark, dark my light, and darker my desire. My soul, like some heat-maddened summer fly, keeps buzzing at the sill. Which eye is I? A fallen man, I climb out of my fear. The mind enters itself, and God the mind. The one is one, free in the tearing wind. Interesting about this poem is he mentions God, although in the articles I read, Roethke was not religious. You can see here a lot of this is alliteration. There really isn't much of a rhyme scheme. It's more focusing on the vowels. There's a lot of self-doubt and confusion within this poem. I feel like he was probably in a bout of depression during this. 4 stanzas, and each line is 10 to 11 syllables. Here's a poem Feud from Open House, 1941. Corruption reaps the young, you dread, the menace of ancestral eyes, recoiling from the serpent head of fate, you blubber in surprise. Exhausted fathers, thinned the blood, you curse the legacy of pain. Darling of an infected brood, you feel disaster climb the vein. There's canker at the root, your seed denies the blessing of the sun, the light essential to your need, the hopes are murdered and undone. The dead leap at the throat, destroy the meaning of the day. Dark forms have scaled your walls, and spies betray old secrets to amorphous swarms. You meditate upon the nerves, inflame with hate. This ancient feud is seldom won. The spirit starves until the dead have been subdued. So you can see here there's rhyming scheme every other letter, 4 stanzas, and it's definitely an angry poem. Angry, depressed. Interestingly enough, though, each line is 8 syllables. So he was focusing a lot on syllables and rhyme for this poem, which kept him conformed, you know. Here is from Open House, 1941. Lull. The wind of hatred blow, cold, cold across the flesh, and chill the anxious heart. Intricate phobias grow from each malignant wish to spoil collective life. Now each man stands apart. We watch opinion drift, think of our separate skins. On well-upholstered bums, the generals cough and shift, playing with painted pins. The arbitrators wait, the newsmen suck their thumbs. The mind is quick to turn away from simple faith to the cant and fury of fools who will never learn. Reason embraces death, while out of frightened eyes still stares the wish to love. I just love this poem. I think it's really interesting because this Open House book was during World War II, so I really wonder if this stuff down where he's talking about the newsmen and all of that is really something going on with that, and it's more of a historical type thing. No real pattern in this one. It was more of a stream of consciousness, actually. Political themes mixed with depression and hope. And it's 2 stanzas, but they're totally different lengths. Here, this poem is actually from The Far Field, one of the last volumes he put together. It has 3 parts. It's insanely long, but I put this first part because I just thought it was beautiful. On things asleep, no balm, a kingdom of stinks and sighs, fetor of cockroaches, dead fish, petroleum, worse than castoreum, of mink or weasels, saliva dripping from warm microphones, agony of crucifixion on bar stools, less and less the illuminated lips, hands active, eyes cherished, happiness left to dogs and children, matters only a saint mentions. Lust fatigues the soul. How to transcend this sensual emptiness? Dreams drain the spirit if we dream too long. In a bleak time, when a week of rain is a year, the slag heaps fume at the edge of the raw cities. The gull wheels over their singular garbage. The great trees no longer shimmer. Not even the soot dances. And the spirit fails to move forward, but shrinks into a half-life, less than itself, falls back a slug, a loose worm, ready for any crevice, an eyeless starer. This poem is insanely depressing, but I just love it. It's free verse, lots of alliteration, well, not really a lot, but a little bit. I really like the use of petroleum and castoreum. 2 stanzas, no real syllable rhythm, none of them. Stream of consciousness. And I thought this poem was interesting to add just because it's very different from the others. This whole book is different from everything else he wrote. Okay, here I just added, from I Am Says the Land, nonsense poems. The Whale. There was a most monstrous whale. He had no skin, he had no tail. When he tried to spout that great big lubber, the best he could do was jiggle his blubber. The Gnu. There's this to remember about the Gnu. He closely resembles, but I can't tell you. Myrtle, not a Harry Potter reference at all, in my mind anyways. I mean, he was way before that, but... There once was a girl named Myrtle, who strangely enough was a turtle. She was made as a hare, she could growl like a bear. Oh, nobody understood Myrtle. She would sit with a book on her knees, my poetry book, if you please. She'd rant and she'd roar, this stuff is a bore. Why, I could do better with only 1 letter. These poets, they write like I sneeze. Like I sneeze. Analysis. Totally different from everything else. You can tell it's for kids. I love it. It makes me wonder if you'd ever met Dr. Seuss, or if I don't even know what time frame Dr. Seuss is from. Here is my imitation. I tried. In the wake of the storm, with wakeless eyes I do stumble, lost within my mind a dark cloud. Lightning strikes, it roars, it rumbles. I am voiceless, I am the shroud. Ancestral thrumming calls to me. Whispering voices call my name. Beckoned, I come to be set free. I am voiceless, I am a flame. Open arms flung, I welcome rain. Weeping deeply, smiling life form. I answer the call, my domain. I am the voice, I am the storm. I tried to focus a lot more on the tight style that he did. I like poems that rhyme every other line, and I like adding things into stanzas. I thought he was a really interesting poet. I hope you guys enjoyed. Here's my works cited. Thanks.